So most of you don't pray 15 minutes a week, much less an hour at a time. So he said, now he went down to pray, and he went back to pray again. And he said, will you not pray with me 1 hour? Then the third time, he said, not my will, but thy will be done. He said, my soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even unto death. Stay here and watch with me. You stay here with me. Watch with me. I'm fixing to make I'm fixing to give up my will. He was in the flesh. You know, I've told the Lord a number of times in my life, brother, I said, Lord, I love you with all my heart. I'm just in no hurry to get to heaven with you. Amen? You understand what I'm saying? How many of you ready to die this morning? I don't see a hand going up. We're not, we talk about how much we love the Lord. I had an evangelist one time, a friend tell me, said, he was preaching out about thinking Modesto about 300 or 400 people. He said, how many this morning want to go to heaven? All the hands went up. He said, put them down. How many of you are taking medicine to live? The number of hands went up. He said, quit taking your medicine. Amen? Well, you see, we say things, and we all want to love Jesus with all our heart, with all our soul, with all our mind, with all of our strength. But sometimes when suffering comes, we don't, oh God, why does this happen to me? Lord, why did you let this happen? Lord, why am I going through this? It's for your maturity. It's for your development in your spiritual man. You see, because this body is going to die one of these days, but our soul is going to live on. Yes. Amen? And what we need to do is that we need to understand this, that whenever we go through trials and tribulations, that the Lord is allowing them to come upon you. See, Jesus went through trials and tribulations. Paul had a great vision of that in Hebrews chapter 2. It was a number of years, approximately, I've forgotten now how long it was, that Paul came upon the scene after Jesus had died, I think around 15 years or so, that Paul came upon the scene. But in Hebrews chapter 2 and verse 10, in verse 9 it says, but we see Jesus, who is made a little lower than the angels. Being lower than the angels meaning that he took on the flesh of humanity, the nature of humanity. Being a little lower than the angels. Then he goes on and says, for the suffering of death, crowned with glory and honor, that he by grace of God might taste death for everyone. That's why Jesus came. Jesus did not come for you to get a new home. Jesus did not come for you to get a $100,000 a year job. Jesus did not come for you to get a Rolls Royce to run around in. Jesus came to give his life that you might have life. That was his whole purpose. Now, in the next verse, it said, for it was fitting for him. The word fitting here really means necessary. The word, it was necessary for him, for whom are all things, and by whom are all things, to bring many sons to glory, and a captain of their salvation, perfect through sufferings. Through sufferings. That means that he had more sufferings than one. That means the Lord had more sufferings actually than one. He was already branded an illegitimate child. When he began to say he was the Son of God, he came under great mockery. And all of those things that Jesus went through, and yet he did not sin. Why? Because he loved you. He loved me. So much that he suffered, that he was made perfect. The word perfect means mature, complete, finished. That's what perfect means. He was made perfect through the things that he suffered. So he suffered. He suffered rejection. How would you like to be called an illegitimate child? I was. I suffered. I didn't suffer. But my father left my mother when she was 5 months pregnant with me. She bore me. And through my lifetime when I was a little boy, I had a vicious stepmother, and she said, he's not John, he's a little illegitimate child. So I went through that all of my life with a woman that didn't love me. And so I know what that persecution means. I knew what that persecution means. I forgave her. Years ago, I forgave her. But I still, when she caused me a lot of suffering when I was a small child. So here it was, when they looked at Jesus, they said, that's not Joseph's son. I wonder who the dad is. This woman's committed adultery on him, or fornication rather on him. And so now, how can he be the Son of God? How can he be one that was born supposedly of a Virgin Mary? How can we accept him as being a child of God, or the man that Jesus had promised, or God had promised? But he suffered all of that humiliation. How many of your lifetime have gone through humiliation? People talking about you, running you down, belittling you. That's humiliation. And we've all more or less have suffered that through our life. So that was one of Christ's sufferings. But in Hebrews 5:3, then Paul goes a little further. Because of this, excuse me, and because of this, he required us for the people, as also himself, to offer sacrifices for sins. I'm sorry, Hebrews 5:8. Though he were a son, I said 3. It said, though he were a son, yet he learned obedience. Hello? He learned obedience. Do you imagine every trial that he went through, he learned something from it? All the ridicule, he learned something from it. He learned something from that because he was obeying God. He said, don't you know that the Lord suffered? Don't you know that his natural flesh, when those cute little Jewish girls came up and said, would you like to come over to my house tonight? I'll fix you a wonderful beef roast. I'm a good cook. Come on over. And his natural man said, go to it. Go eat it. Get married. But his spiritual man said, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. So here he was through this temptation, through this trials. I don't know how many of you sat through about 45 minutes at your church, but I'm not a short-winded preacher. So just hang on with me. So all the things that he suffered. He suffered. He was ridiculed through his sufferings. But he learned obedience. What was that obedience? To God. He learned obedience to God. When you go through your trials, instead of saying, oh, God, help me, the quicker you realize that you're going through that trial and you praise your way through it, the quicker you get to victory. Amen? Because you are going to be tempted and tested and tried. So yet he learned obedience by the things that he suffered. He didn't come to this world and say, boy, look at me, I'm the man. I'm the child of God. Just bring me that beautiful stallion over there. I want the best house that you have to live in. Give me the best. No. He didn't. He became as a lowly person, didn't he? Riding that little old donkey down the road. Getting around on the donkey. He said, foxes have their holes, birds have their nests, but the Son of God has no place to lay his head. How many of you buying your own homes or own your own homes? This is where you lay your head, or you have a home. We all have a home, don't we? That's where you lay your head. He said, I don't have anything that's my